Hi, welcome to another edition of Photoshop for Video. I'm your host, Rich Harrington, and this week we're going to take a look at the Shadow Highlights command. Now, we've used this command in the past, but today I'm going to show you a couple of things you might not have thought of. Let's jump in. We have an image here that's dark. It was shot at sunset, and we have a very bright source in it, which is slightly overexposed, and we have a lot of underexposed areas. We can go ahead and take advantage here of the Shadow Highlights command by choosing Image, Adjustments, Shadow Highlight. Now, when you open this up, it's normally going to look like this, which is the basic view. Chances are you're working with Photoshop or even Photoshop Extended. You have paid more than most people do for computer software. So instead of working in basic mode, why don't you access the professional mode that's going to give you greater controls? To do that, simply click the Show More Options box, and it instantly opens up with more sliders. Let's start at the top here. We have Shadows, which is the darkest area. And currently, the tonal width is set to 50%, which means that the darkest half of the image is being treated as a shadow. If I want to control that here, we could say treat the darkest 80%, or only treat the darkest third. And you see that the command does not go as aggressively after the entire image. So by setting it to 33%, as we adjust the amount slider here, you'll see that only the darkest shadowy areas are being affected. We can adjust radius here to help feather that a bit so it's not quite as abrupt. Now, as far as the highlights go, we're going to say that only go after the brightest area here and knock that down. Now, if it's affecting too much of the image, you can adjust the width slider here to narrow it. So in this case, we're saying only go after the brightest 15% and pull that down a bit. You'll see what that's done is it's knocked out some of the brightness in the sun area that was overexposed. If this was actually a raw image, we could have used a command like recovery to pull some of that back in. Now, the biggest thing here is when you do a shadow highlights adjustment, you need to put some color correction back in because it has a tendency to get a little washed out. And if your blacks go soft, put a little bit of contrast back in. If we toggle the preview box here, you'll see that we made a pretty big difference. And let's click OK. Now, we've shown you the shadow highlight command before. If you're a regular podcast subscriber, you've seen this and you're saying, well, what's new? Well, two things. One, we can use this command on a smart object, and two, we can use it on a video clip. Let's go ahead here and close this shot down. And I've opened up a video clip into Photoshop CS3 Extended. Now, in case you haven't kept up on the latest, Photoshop CS3 Extended can open and work with video clips, which opens up any adjustment that you could do to a still image can now be done to video. This includes the shadow highlight command. In order to do this, though, there's a couple things you have to do. First off, if you just run the filter right now, it's only going to apply to the current frame. Remember, we could choose Window, Animation, and this lets us see all the frames here in the loaded video clip. So if we ran a filter now, it would only apply to the current frame. So instead, let's go ahead and right-click on this layer and choose Convert to Smart Object. When you turn this video layer into a smart object, all of the original frames are embedded into the smart object. This means that you can apply a filter to the smart object, and it retains as a smart filter, which means you can edit it at any point in time, and the filter will apply to the entire video clip all at once. So let's go ahead and choose Image, Adjustments, Shadow Highlight. Now, you might be wondering, I thought you said filter. Well, while it's under the image menu, the shadow highlight is actually a filter at its heart. That's why it still works on smart objects. You'll see that the variations command and the shadow highlight command, while grouped as image adjustments, actually use filter technology. So this means they can work as a smart filter on your smart object. Let's go ahead and run that. And notice what it did. It used the settings from before. We can go ahead and tweak this here. And let's say that I wanted to go only after the darkest third of shadows and play with bringing those up. Notice there it's as shot. If I open that up, we start to see a little bit more light in the shadowy areas. And we've got some highlights here that are distracting on the metal surfaces. So I'll go ahead and pull those down a little bit, back off the width so it's not as aggressive. and put a little bit of color correction and contrast back in, and let's just play with that. There we go. If I toggle the preview here, you'll see before and after. So let's go ahead and apply that. And in fact, this is now applied to the smart object. If we click play in the animation palette here, you'll see that the shadow highlight filter is being applied dynamically to every single frame of video. And it's limiting its adjustments based upon the tonal ranges we specified. So this is a great way to repair a shot. I love the color correction tools I have in programs like Final Cut Pro, Premiere Pro, and Avid. But sometimes I get a shot that's just really tough, and I've ached for the ability to use Photoshop's shadow highlight command. Well, now you can. All you have to do is bring that video clip in and apply the filter once you've turned the video clip into a smart object. Now you're saying, how do I get it out of here? Don't worry, it's simple. You go to the File menu and choose File, Export, Render Video. When you do this, it asks you to specify where you want it to write, and you can export it as a QuickTime movie or any other format, and then just click Settings. And at this point, it's just like any other module you've ever done out of QuickTime Pro or most editing programs. If you click Settings, you could specify any codec you have loaded. Choose your frame rate, specify the color space. In this case, we just do millions of colors, and you could write the file out. Again, if you are on your video editing system, any codec, compressor, decompressor you have loaded for that video editing system will work. So you could bring the video into Photoshop and work with it and write it back out as an Avid file, a Premiere Pro, Sony Vegas file, anything. Photoshop will support it. I hope this has given you some new ideas on how to get more out of Adobe Photoshop. My name's Rich Harrington. Be sure to check out our resource website at photoshopforvideo.com, where you'll find tons of back episodes that'll give you more ideas on how to get things done in Adobe Photoshop. For Photoshop for Video, I'm Rich Harrington.